Welcome back into this space. Welcome to a season of miracles in the sovereign way. Now, when we say miracle, we talked about this last week. When we say miracle, what comes to mind is usually one of two things. Either we're thinking about the life is a miracle mindset, where your prehension is attuned to receive in wonderful awe all of the marvels of natural beauty and glorious symphony of unfolding occurrences around you. This is when you're in the mindset of, oh, look at a ladybird, and oh, my human body is a miracle, and how many miraculous processes needed to come together for me to be able to enjoy this beautiful glass of water right here. You know, when you can see the dewdrop on the tip of a leaf as an entire universe, that's sort of miracle-mindedness. But we also think about the sudden, unexpected, mind-blowing occurrence that changes the course of everything. Suddenly healed, instantaneous remission, or the woman who can lift up the car to save her trapped child underneath. We think of these unexpected, inexplicable moments. We'll call them the God drop. And last week we began this series, and we're going to lead all the way up to Christmas to magnify both of these forms of miracle in your awareness and in your energy field. So that means we're attuning you to the knowing of miracle. Now, we create with our knowing, not with our thoughts, not with our vibes. We create with our knowing. And so we're enhancing our knowing of miracle. And the purpose is to develop in ourselves, in our modus operandi, in the way we work, to develop the art and craft of conscious miracle work, to enhance your magnetic fields that new things can easily form in your vibrational environment, and to give you the practical tools so that you may be one of the miracle workers in the great apostleship of the kingdom, so that you can be someone who can demonstrate the promise that all things are source, spirit, and substance, and you have authority to command in love. And so that's why we're doing this series, to give you that authority, to enhance that knowing and that power that is within you. As always, these teachings are very rich and they're very high vibrational transmission. So it's best not to try to process everything intellectually, but please feel free to write down anything that comes up for you, anything that highlights itself for you and says, hey, Maria, Erika, Esther, Steph, this is something I want you to know. Those are the things you write down. Don't try and scribble everything I say. But to be really present in the receiving, I also want to invite you, if you haven't already, to join the Oasis, to practice with others in a safe and non-judgmental setting. It's only $20 a month until the end of this year, and you can join in with as many or as few of the many sessions and opportunities we have during the week. The idea is that you will not get left behind if you can't make everything, because once you're in the Oasis, you're in the Oasis. So this is a great place for us to practice our mastery together. And let me tell you, just a week into this miracle course, our Oasis students are already reporting miracles. Just today, before we started this recording, we've heard incredible miracles. And throughout the week, one has been able to provide shelter for 100 vulnerable people and food for 600 women and children. One person on the brink of disaster has suddenly found the perfect place to stay over Christmas. One has received an incredible pop of energy and post-op recovery after a big surgery. And the miracles are still pouring in. Every one of our members in the Oasis has been challenged in their faith and trust, and has yet together remained steadfast, standing on the rock that is God's endless promise to hold you and keep you safe from harm. When we are together in that trust, it's easier to hold on to that knowing. Here's Psalm 91:4. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. So we spoke last week about the two planes of miracle work. Let's review. in miracle work, and that is conscious miracle work, that is for you who are on the conscious path of enlightenment. You are one who has already chosen to be an apostle, a demonstrator of God's presence and capability and power. And so miracle work, there are two planes to consider. The horizontal plane of miracle work, where your mind is currently set. This is your log of consciousness. And this is essentially, who am I being in relation to what is? That's what this means. What is, and who am I in relation to that? Am I all the way down in hopelessness and despair? Or am I all the way up in integrated, embodied knowing that I am that I am? Where am I on that imaginary scale? That's the horizontal plane of miracle work. So what is the quality standard of your vibrational reality? That depends on where you log on this imaginary scale conceived by Dr. David Hawkins, where 0 is absolute despair and separation from God, and 1000 at the top is complete embodied knowing. I am. I'm going to specifically say knowing I am, because everybody am, whether you know it or not, but 100% integrated embodied knowing I am that I am is at 1000. And miracle-mindedness begins around 500, and you really get to participate in conscious miracle-mindedness at the point where God's ever-present grace and your mindset mastery converge. So the horizontal plane of miracle work is, where am I on this imaginary scale? And the vertical plane of miracle work is the ever-present, hang on, let me just let Aaron in. The vertical plane of miracle work is the God drop, the formation of quantum potentiality. Because all possibilities are ever present wherever you are on this scale. So that means that your mastery in relation to this is to surrender or allow or accept the perfect gift of grace. That's why we know that even at rock bottom, this line is still present. This line is present here, it's present here, it's present here. It doesn't rely on your mastery. It's always there. So that means that your conscious miracle work in relation to that plane of miracle work is your surrender to the possibility and to intend to transcend all and any subconscious resistance to the formation of God's will. That's why we know this place at rock bottom, where we suddenly sort of let go of all control. But you don't need to get to rock bottom for that kind of surrender. And, your job as a conscious miracle worker is to not need to get to rock bottom before you surrender to God's will. So today we're going to talk a bit more about the horizontal plane, not to dwell on what you need to do to make the miracle happen, because that's all in God's hands, but to demonstrate the authority that you have to live in miracle-mindedness, even as you're waiting for God to make the next move. So we're talking about your mental mastery and your vibrational mastery to uphold a lifestyle in a dimension where miracles are a part of the natural elements. That's the horizontal plane. Now, I come from a long line of miracle workers. Miracle workers, healers, and super talents. On my dad's side, we've got Giovanni Sistini. She was a world-famous opera singer who eloped with a Portuguese knight. There's Joseph Stockeler, the founder of the finest organ makers in the world. There's Mozart Wilson, the composer. And of course, there's Dorothy Keren, who I told you about last week. She was the Christian saint who facilitated countless miracle healings and gave us our worldly mission to empower the awakened ones. And I'm going to share some of the considerations and techniques that goes with great mastery. But the trick that I have, that I treasure the most for miracle making, didn't come from my father's side of super talented miracle workers. It came from my mother's side. And this is a line of poor, hardworking Irish farmers and frontline carers, maids, nurses, for generations and generations and generations. Nothing spectacular or superlative about them at all. The word potatoes comes to mind. But the paradigm that I inherited from that lineage of understanding passed into my cellular consciousness from past generations, passed down to me by my mother, who still lives a life of incredible luck and miracle. This is a code that they passed on to me that I'm going to share with you. I want you to choose to embody this code. I'm going to share it with you now. Ancient Irish wisdom. Be here, be poised, be present. If you're in the Oasis, tap your fingers. And repeat after me. Make sure you're on mute. Repeat after me with the conviction that it is true, and choose it as your destiny. I am going to now give you the code. It always works out all right in the end. It always works out all right in the end. It always works out all right in the end. It always works out all right in the end. It always works out all right in the end. Amen. Take a few moments just to hold this knowing. Imagine the implication of this truth when you hold that in your diamond core. This simple code from a long line of potato farmers, the most powerful miracle work you can do. Imagine the peace. Because you know that it's true. So this is a universal law. It is not randomly distributed luck. It is truth. And if it is a universal law, then it is one that you can apply to every moment, to every choice, to every miracle you ask for. So make agreement right now. Type it in the comments wherever you are. It always works out all right in the end. Grace trumps your mastery every time. But we shall still dwell on mastery for a little bit, because we can't help ourselves. We shall dwell on miracle-mindedness. Let's do it like this. Imagine, if you will, an infinite number of parallel dimensions where your life is playing out an infinite number of times in an infinite number of ways. Everything is possible in the mind of God. Now imagine that parallel alternative dimension where the miracle you're asking for is complete. Imagine if you could woof yourself into that dimension. Let's just play a little thought experiment and imagine if that could be so. If it really is true that the world, the whole universe, the manifested reality of substance is an element that is malleable to consciousness. Let's imagine for a moment that it's true that God is a trinity of source and spirit and substance, and that source commands the spirit to move the substance. And let's imagine then that maybe it's true that you really are created in the image of God, and that you really can, with your mind and with your vibration, dial into different realities, different vibrational realities. Let's imagine for a moment that it really is true that the whole universe, as proven recently, is a phenomenological hologram that responds to who you are and how you're showing up in the moment. Who am I in relation to what is? Let's imagine for a moment then that you really can dial in and out of different vibrational realities. Then what are the key characteristics of the dimensions in which miracles are a part of the natural elemental reality? How do we know when we're in such a dimension? And how do we know when we're not? So let's spend some time today investigating what the key characteristics are of those dimensions where miracles are a natural part of the system. Because then if you're familiar with those characteristics, then they'll be alive in your awareness. And you'll be able to see, now I am in miracle-mindedness, and now I'm not. You'll also get to know the landscape very well. So this really is about you harvesting miracle in your life by your works. This is your mastery we're talking about here. So it means that your attention in this plane of miracle work, your attention is to the craft of knowing yourself as being one with the miraculous life. Right? Get that? So the craft is knowing yourself as one with the miraculous life. So you're tending to your physical health. You're understanding that the miraculous life permeates your physical health, which means you don't need to make agreement with what it says on that diagnosis necessarily. It means that miracle-mindedness or miracles run through your mental mastery, through your energy work, through your meditation, through your prayer, through your devotion. You are one with the miraculous life, and so the miraculous life permeates all these things. So you hold your vibrational poise and you live in that dimension where your manifest universe is rich with droplets of God. Where joy is a system that, a currency is a better word, where joy is a currency that opens the floodgates of divine favor, and grace operates all things. Unnecessary obstacles are resolved easily and surprisingly, and you learn your lessons well from necessary obstacles, because you know some obstacles are necessary. What's in the way is the way. Turning your agony into majesty with a new story, just by the nature of your being. And you know that miracles are easy and wonderful, so you stay in ease and wonder. You live a high resolution love affair with life. Let's have a quick look at the basics one more time. Okay, so we agree that we could choose to organize the whole universe and God, you know, the way humans are wont to do. Let's organize God. We could organize God into three elements. We could say source, which is loving consciousness, right? This is Am. Spirit, which is power, creativity, movement, and substance, which is particularized reality, particle, form, stuff. And we have a trinity here of God, distinct but indivisible. They're definitely distinct from one another, but they are still one whole. That's the basic philosophy on which we're going to do this miracle work course. So we're making the assumption that the whole universe is source, which commands the spirit to move the substance, and all things are that. Oops, And that point at 1,000 that I showed you is the extent to which you know yourself as that. So let's say you haven't quite reached 1,000, you're not Jesus yet, but you are somewhere between complete forgetfulness and knowing. And as you ascend, as you journey on the path of conscious enlightenment, this triangle becomes bigger and bigger as you know more and more fully that this is the truth. Yes? Good. And if all things are that, then this is all things, then you are an individualized strand of that, knowing the world through your framework of consciousness, endlessly creating, because the creator is ceaselessly creating the created with its creativity. And the creative spirit moves through your framework of consciousness, and the energy that you project helps the adamantine particles of substance organize themselves in response to that, and that's what you have as your life. Now, you've just chosen to embody this. It will be all right in the end. You've chosen to embody that. Look at the implications of that. Creative spirit can't help but create. It will be all right in the end. That's why it's so poignant to have inherited this code genetically, right? Actually, you didn't inherit it genetically. It's already there because it's true. But perhaps you have a conflicting ideal. Perhaps there's some also here going, it all comes crashing down. Perhaps you have that code as well. Perhaps you've got two conflicting codes in your consciousness. That's a nuisance, isn't it? We end up feeling like we're in a double bind, like we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. But we do also end up living in constant creation. So now we have it will be all right in the end embedded in our diamond consciousness, and you can't help creating miraculous solutions for yourself. And your mastery is what's attuning you to higher and deeper and richer expressions of that remembering. Your triangle is getting bigger, your diamond is getting purer. Because let's be honest, it isn't new to you that it will work out. You already know that it will work out. You've already made agreement with this universal truth, and you remembered that you already knew. So it will work out all right in the end, but you just keep forgetting, and that's when we suffer. So our mental and vibrational mastery are your end of the bargain, to stay in love while the miracle forms, to do your energy hygiene so that the environment is welcoming for the miracle. And as you practice this mastery, you're holding a poise in mindset and vibration. And this is especially for you who's on the path of conscious enlightenment, because you are attuning steadily to more authority. So you have more of a vibrational impact. And you're attuning to greater confidence and trust. So let's have a quick look at this scale again. I want to give you some characteristics so we can understand where we're at on the scale. I'm going to point out, of course, that the scale has nothing to do with worth. It's got nothing to do with spiritual value. It's got nothing to do with potential. It's simply an arbitrary measurement of how much love you are currently embodying. At 400, so 0 is complete despair, 200 is the level of neutrality. At 200, we have this attitude that, meh, you win some, you lose some. At 300 begins the level of reason. At 400, we have genius. In the 400s, I'm going to start with the descriptions here. Now, anything below 200 is net entropy. Anything above 200 is net ascension. We know the feeling of entropy. It's the feeling of depression. Things are getting worse. We have anger, we have jealousy, we have shame at the very bottom. At the beginning of ascension, we begin to have more confidence, more trust, more hope, etc., as we climb our way up this imaginary scale. Now, of course, we know ascension isn't a linear game, but let's just play along. So in 400, we get the realm of understanding. Understanding. This is when you've activated your spiritual genius. You thirst for understanding. Your life view is meaningful, and you've learned that nothing in life holds any inherent meaning in and of itself that you need to unlock, but there is profound meaning in your life. And at the 400s, when we're in the 400s, we're driven by reason. And reason is sovereign over emotion. And that gives you the freedom to enjoy research and thinking, and you spend a lot of time in your intellect. This is where scientists and doctors and university professors, they calibrate at this level often for a lifetime. And they have a huge motivation to make a difference on a global scale. So you've spent time in that field, you've spent time in that realm, in that dimension that was occupied by Hawkins and Einstein and Freud and Newton. They all calibrated at 499. And there's the limitation of the 400s right there, which is the addiction to the linear intellect. The intellect is a linear machine, and it doesn't allow access to non-linear divine knowledge, which even at the level of genius comes from revelation, not deduction. So the intellect is involved in processing and synthesizing and formulating divine knowledge, but it cannot discover divine knowledge with the data that it already has. So you have to get into miracle-mindedness, you have to make a leap, and you have to cross this threshold. You have to cross this threshold out of the 400s into the 500s. Because you have a tremendous amount of power at 400, but you cannot, of your own linear mind, generate something unknown. You must cross this threshold into 500. That's where the method of processing is revelation rather than reasoning and thinking. Now in 500, going over the level of 500 is difficult, spiritually and emotionally, because you begin identifying with your proximate aura and your fields, your biofield, rather than the body. So we always experience what they often called in the spiritual world, they often call it an ego death. We always experience sort of an ego death when we first transcend into the 500s. We release our personal story, we release our personal identity, and we come into an unshakable place of harmony and cohesion in self, to be in Christ. And even though other energies are still playing a role in your life, and you still experience the full spectrum of the human experience, you still feel, or you can dip your toes down in the buggy waters if you like. You still can. Love is still your underlying motivator. In the 500s, love is your underlying motivator, even when you're sad. So the scale has nothing to do with how you're feeling, by the way. You don't wake up in the morning, stump your toe and throw a tantrum and then go, oh shoot, now I've fallen down into the 100s. That's not what it means. We're talking about the embodiment of your knowing, I am that I am. So in the 500s, this is when we get into light work and apostleship. This is where we begin to be ordained and called into demonstrating God in the flesh. So we are loving others with no expectation of any return of any form, because we understand what the return is. We know the return of Christ. And even though you know what the desires of your ego are, you can still sense, oh, I wish I had $1 million. You can still sense the desires of your ego, and often you indulge them. Often you indulge your ego, but you're not entangled with it. You're not entangled with those desires, and they have no authority over you. You reason over emotion, but you never reason over love. And as you are the one that is held in that marriage to the love that is pure, unfaltering, unwavering, not subject to any external conditions, you are sovereign. So this is where sovereignty begins in the 500s. And since you know yourself as love, so love therefore is how life meets you in your devotional dance. Look at this. If I know I am love, then what is created for me in the sensual intimacy with my own life? More love. Now, I know that we're doing sort of a deep dive into the characteristics of this dimension, but I have to say that experientially, the 500s really vary from person to person, because this is the first time that we're actually creating not in line with common system, but completely uniquely as the word of God moves through you. So it's quite hard to sort of compare and say, this is what you should expect when you're living in the 500s. It doesn't really work like that, because it's going to be completely unique to you as your own personal magic begins to make itself manifest. But I can say that what seems to be a commonality for those who newly arrive into that dimension is having to learn how to deal with spiritual attacks from the lower astral realms. And we can call them negative energies, we can call them whatever it is that we like to call them, but we can begin to feel vulnerable to that spiritual warfare that we've discussed before. It's not uncommon to experience various kinds of negative energy, almost as if it's coming at us instead of through us. And this is where we need to begin to learn that the world is not a reflection of us. Only the surface of the world is a reflection. There's actually a great depth to the world. And so this is where we start developing alchemy, because we have to shift gears from dealing head on in a linear way with the problems of the world, and instead beginning with infusing structure with essence, infusing substance with new life force, transferring everything you touch back into truth. And so that's why we have this sort of period of time when we're developing our mastery in the early 500s. We do have this period of time where we seem like we're dealing with these sorts of spiritual attacks quite often. But you know that you're in this realm anyway when the dominant emotion is serenity and compassion, and you've moved away from the need to defend or prove. It's because you're tuned into the inner joy that arises from every moment of existence rather than from an external source. So you often have the sense of completeness. This is good. I am content in every circumstance. I know divine order in this. What is it? It is good. This is where miracle-mindedness becomes default. So when your diamond, let's say, dwells at that point of 500 on that imaginary scale, miracle-mindedness is the way of life that you're living. This is where miracle is an element, just like water, just like air. It's just a part of your natural experience. If all you see is the miracle of real life, then miracle is all you get. But let me highlight, this does not mean that you're walking around in a jolly chipper mood all the time. If you're not that sort of jolly chipper person, don't feel bad. It doesn't mean you're not in joy. It means that you can be poised to what is. That's unconditional love, to be poised to what is. Even the hard and painful stuff, to be looking at that and know, I am. Around 4% of the world reaches the level of love at 500, and around 0.4% of the world reaches the level of unconditional love at 540. Now, unconditional love doesn't mean putting up with everything. It means having the embodied, permanent remembering that I am God's love. I am loving, lovable, and beloved forever. And there's nothing anyone can do about it, especially me. I've fallen in love with myself again. That's what unconditional love means. 0.4%. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but it is 32 million people on this planet that are unconditionally loving. Think of the magnitude of their collective love, of our collective love. Think of the power. What's the population in your area? What is 0%, 0.4% of that population? You will be surprised to discover that you are surrounded by saints and angels. That's your tribe. They are your people. Genius mystics in love. And you might be saying, well, where are they all then? Everyone on my Facebook feed is all bitching and moaning. I say, go out there in love and you will see them. Your eyes will meet at the supermarket. You'll sit together at the coffee shop. You will connect. You will share stories and discover that there are many more people who share your hope and your faith in a new world and are actually living in it right now. The world is actually in a very good place indeed. We are making progress and it will be all right in the end. Find your tribe. There's many. And then we ascend. We keep ascending. That's 500, love. And then 600, bliss. What a lovely word. The stillness of mind. No rush to transcend anything in particular. Not rushing around trying to heal past wounds or fix things. Just no yearning for any kind of experience at all. Just peacefully chopping wood and carrying water. Doing your service. Safe in your permanent understanding of your connectedness with all that exists. At that level, when you live by insight rather than foresight, like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, guided by the sovereign heart, surrendered and devoted. And then, of course, 700 up to 1,000, that state of pervasible, unshakable being, the power of now, inexpressible, ineffable. And you can notice the power of someone at this level of consciousness simply by thinking about them. You can raise your own consciousness, raise your vibration, just thinking about these ones, these avatars. And they've made an enormous impact on our shared ascension by the nature of their love. It's why you want to keep Jesus Christ close to you in your life, entangled with him as you are, your groom always holding space for you, right up here at 1,000, an electromagnetic weight that can save you no matter how deep you sink. What a miracle. What a miracle. So these are the dynamics that you want to be aware of to live in miracle-mindedness. Again, I'm going to stress, it's not behavior that you must meet to be worthy of a miracle. That's not it. It's simply the characteristics of the dimensions where your miracle is just a natural part of the elements of creation. It's where grace rules the world, not system. Anything below 500 is not miracle-mindedness. Even though it's genius, it's not miracle-mindedness. It's linear consciousness. Anything above 500, even on the bad days, is miracle-mindedness because it's quantum. And your ascension is a game of weaving in and out and through these fields, collecting treasures and performing challenges in each one, learning more and more about who God is in you. And so I've shared all of this to highlight and to make intimate with the universal dimensions that you often frequent. Because I bet as I read the characteristics, you recognized them, didn't you? You were like, yep, that's me. That's me. That's me. You live, you frequent these worlds, these dimensions where miracle is real all the time. So we're going to get even more intimate with that over the next week, and we'll be blown away by how life responds. Do you remember my story from last week? I began by sharing a story. I shared my story, my journey. And I told you how we gave up everything to go and start a chocolate business in the Rocky Mountains. But it fell apart. And so my family ended up homeless in a barn where we lived with our 2 young daughters, aged 6 and 2. Until by utter miracle, we ended up in a splendid cabin on 180 acres for 7 months while I apprenticed for priesthood and began writing Sovereign. Well, here's how that story continues. We lived there for 7 months until it was time for the owner to come back. We knew what we were doing, right? Matt was applying for a job as a camp director at an Episcopal retreat center, and they were going to provide the house, and I was going to be going to seminary, and I was going to be working on Sovereign. The process was almost complete. We'd been to see the house in the woods where we were going to live. We'd been to see the land. We'd been to see the camp. It was perfect. The children would be very happy growing up there. It really was the happy, happy ending to the story that only months ago had been absolute disaster as I was protecting my children from lightning in a derelict barn. Now everything had been redeemed and God had given us a miracle. And this was just, only God could have done this. It was perfect. We would be taken care of forever, a home provided, career provided, security, everything was mint. And then 3 days before we were to move out of that cabin and into the camp, we got that phone call. It was history repeating itself. I took this phone call the year before, when I was in Utah, and Matt called me to say it's all over. And here we are again, answering the call, and they say they've canceled the project. They weren't going to go through with appointing a camp director for this retreat center. They couldn't really explain it. It just wasn't the right time, they said. Can't breathe. At the edge of the cliff again. 3 days to be out, and we have nothing. It was all sorted, and now we have nothing. God pulled the rug out from underneath us. Now, in hindsight, of course, the biggest disasters are the greatest miracles, aren't they? And we didn't know, and neither did the Episcopal Church, that 6 months later, COVID would bring the world to its knees and there would be absolutely no need for any camps for a few years. Nobody knew. God knew. Would have been awful for us being stuck there for COVID. God knew, but we didn't. It's a miracle that the manifestation that we had all been working so hard on, it's a miracle that that didn't come true. Because there was a lot of creative power gone into that. The Episcopal Church were praying into that miracle. Didn't come true. How could that not come true? It's a miracle. It's a miracle of grace that our life was once again shaken up, turned on its head. And there we are at the edge of life. 3 days and no future beyond that. But poise in the face of what is keeps your creative framework in neutral. So the sovereign mind can rearrange the adamantine particles of substance so that everything changes in the blink of an eye. Poise prevents you from making judgment about what is, and therefore start creating on top of an inverted truth. Poise allows God to breathe through you. So he says, go on Instagram. Went on Instagram. There's a woman. She's been following me. I've been following her. She's a priestess witch who lives in a yurt in the wilderness in Colorado. Her children are the same age as mine. Her man works the land, and she spins her slow devotion into the elements, birthing love through her weaving and her sewing. And they said we could come So we bought a canvas tent, and suddenly the floodgates opened and people rushed in with resources, solar panels, car batteries, tools. And before we know it, we're living off grid in the high desert, milking goats, weaving willow, eating fresh apricots, drinking snowmelt, and gazing into the Milky Way galaxy at night. From chocolatier to homeless in a barn, to breaking bread with a bishop in the great Episcopal Cathedral in Denver, to homeless again, to living free in the galaxy, learning the languages of the soul of the world as we apprenticed with witch. It always works out all right in the end. And each miracle was on the other side of a rock bottom. I don't know how many times I thought to myself, oh no, God is taking away our miracle. Why? I'm not holy enough. I'm not vibrationally powerful enough. I haven't come into proper resonance with whatever the amount is that I think that I need in order to create the lifestyle that I think that I want. How many tantrums? Countless. Matt will testify. But God is faithful anyway, and always comes through. He's not taking away your miracle. He's making a new one. And he showers us with these funny little miracles too. When we were out there, we were out in the desert, living in a tent. We knew we wanted to give our children some spiritual nourishment. So we found an Episcopal church, because that was the current spiritual language that we were using, was this beautiful layman's terms called the Episcopal way. And we found a little Episcopal church in Delta. We took the children to that service. And my goodness, as much as we adored them, it was the most boring, droll experience you can imagine. We will serve Jesus forever and ever and ever. And we didn't want the children to associate spirituality with that sense of God, this is never going to end. So we had a really nice coffee hour with the people there, and I gave a woman a healing. I gave her a beautiful hands-on healing because she was going into surgery the next day. But we did decide that, I fast forwarded. So this droll service gave the woman a beautiful healing. And the next week she said that healing had helped her recover so much faster from the surgery. And she gave me 12 duck eggs to celebrate, 12 duck eggs. So I take 6 duck eggs and I give the other 6 to the witch and the land. And then we say, Matt and I look at each other and we say, perhaps we won't go back there just because, well, you know, think of the children. So we found another church on the other side of Delta. And this one was a Universalist church. And there was harps playing and there were fairy lights, and it was much more lively and much more enjoyable for the kiddos. And we met another family there who said, we also live in a tent. Do you want to come and have, you know, a pizza on our stone oven one day? And we said, yes, that would be lovely. So we drive out into the wilderness to be with this family and have pizza on their stone oven out in the wild. And we had a really nice experience together, getting to know each other. And then towards the end of the evening, the woman says, oh, look, my mother's arrived. And down the end of the little woodland lane, there's a little woman waddling along. She waddles all the way up the little lane. Who is it? It's the duck egg lady from the Episcopal church on the other side of Delta. So these funny little, happy little miracles that are there for no other reason than to remind you of the ease and delight with which these miracles occur. And if you remember back to last week, we did agree, we set the intention that to eagerly desire a miracle, to eagerly desire your own miracle-mindedness, to be in that vibration of poised eagerness and desire for love. That is the currency that has these little bubbles of miracle pop up. But the ability to manifest or allow miracles into our lives doesn't give us a free ticket to a lifetime without adversity or challenge. Our story continues after we got the news of my grandmother's death and my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we left our off-grid tent life and moved to inner city England to be with our family in grief. I'll share more of that story next week, the rest, in fact, leading all the way up to an out-of-this-world miracle in Jesus' name, where $100,000 in debt was erased from our burden. Grace cancels karma. And I'll tell you all about that next week. But miracles aren't for canceling the sacred hardship. Life is rich. And it is in the contrast of our experiences that we really get to know the dimensionality of our love story with God. But miracles do give us a boost to embrace that richness and to remind us when we're standing knee-deep in a terrible mess that the ever-present, everlasting love that created all things also knows how to fix this sticky situation. And you, made in the image of God, do too. For this reason alone, rest assured, it will be all right in the end. Thank you very much for coming. Come back next week where we finish this beautiful series with an extraordinary teaching on the God drop. And now I'm going to turn off the recording and we're going to move to the Oasis.